So welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this class, and we'll be covering some of the areas that we did not tackle in the previous class. And for those of you who are there in the physical class that we had, we did mention that the objectives of procurement range from the following rights. The first one is, we said this had to do with item, and we spoke about all the method of specification that we have. Then you have the right time, and in this one we were talking about lead time management, both internally and externally. Then we had the right price, and under this section we talked about all issues that have to do with insourcing and outsourcing. We had issues to do with local sourcing versus international sourcing. You can go through this in your notes. Then we had issues with analysis methods, where we said you can have a total cost of ownership analysis method, or the weighted method, where you're using points to give importance to everything. Then we also looked at procurement methods, where we talked about requests for quotations. We had open tendering or restricted tendering. We had PPPs and so forth. Then we also had the right source, and in this case we did talk about the outsourcing models that we can use to determine what is the core function of an organization and what is not core. So the remaining ones have to do with with quantity. That's the first one. Then we have quality. Then we have relationships. These are the three things that we will talk about today. So let me clear out this for us. Let me even just make it a bit faster. Just erasing this so that we can get a good board. So we will start with the relationship. We'll start with relationship, and in the relationship we'll be talking about some of the aspects that are introduced in the last class. So under relationship, we said that the type of relationship that a buyer will use against a supplier will depend, first of all, on the product in question. Secondly, on the procurement strategy that is being used. Now, we said that under product, you can have product classification based on the value. That's the first one, or quantity being used. Then you have the risk aspect of it. So we can have the following types of products within an organization. You can have a product whose value or quantity being used can either be high or low. Then we can have a product whose risk can be high or low. So on this section we have the quantity, and on this section we have risk. It can also be value related, but let's simplify them. So we have four possible scenarios. The first one is the product used is high in quantity and also high in risk. The second one is the product being used is low in quantity but high in risk, maybe due to the technology or the value of the product. The third one is the quantity used is high in value and low in risk. The fourth one is the product is low in value and low in risk. Whichever section we will have it, for example, when we have a product which is low in value but high in risk, or high in value over here, the approach of the relationship would differ from a product whose quantity is low and the risk is low. So you can have methods as systems contracting, performance-based contracting. All those methods will depend on this quadrant that we're talking about here. But when it comes to relationships, you can have two main approaches. You can have a transactional relationship or a mutual relationship. A mutual relationship. Graphically, or using a diagram, this is the buyer, this is the seller, and we said initially that the buyer is interested with the lowest price but the highest quality. The seller is interested with the highest price but giving the least in features. When you have a mutual relationship, they are sharing their resources so that they can arrive at a win-win situation. This is where the nature of relationship is continual and not one-off. You're not buying one item off. If you're buying only one item, then in that case, you can use what you call a transactional relationship. And in this relationship, you have the buyer here, you have the seller over here. And the buyer is interested in, again, getting the best price or the lowest price and the highest features. And we see the supplier wants the lowest features given for the highest price. So if we are having a one-off relationships, this is the diagram that would apply, because they are not repeating their buy, so they are only exchanging the product on one end here and information and money on the other end. And this is what we call a win-lose situation. Again, do not forget that for these two types of relationships, they will mainly rely on the product in question. What is the nature of the product that is being discussed? Now, what are some of the other subtypes under these two main macro relationships? We said you can have what you call a captive buyer, there are four, but I'll just stick to these two, or a captive seller. And we said a captive buyer is created by this type of relationship, either due to the technology of the product in question. Again, some of the other driving factors that create captive buyers is the cost of switching. The cost of switching. Very, very important to note. Okay, so let us think of some of the relationships that we can have under a captive buyer. The first one is Safaricom users. We did see this in the last video. These are Safaricom users. For all of them, the cost of switching to Airtel or any other telecommunications service is very, very high. So they remain captive buyers to Safaricom, because Safaricom is basically the market leader with more than 50% of the market share. So the idea of changing them is very, very expensive. Now, we go to a captive seller. The captive seller is created again by the technology of the product. Technology of the product. And this is what I mean. The product is so complex that it has very few suppliers or very few buyers who can buy it in that form. A good example would be the steel industry. The steel industry. And the products that are provided under the steel section are so unique that they can only be given to a certain seller. that is a captive seller sort of situation. So whenever we're thinking about relationships, think about what is the type of the product and what does that product mean when it comes to the types of relationships which can be created. And the main reason why this is important is it affects the nature of negotiation approach that you will use. The negotiation approach for a win-lose relationship is not the same for a win-win situation. Again, there is a handout for this. You can go through it. I will not delve into those issues right now. So those are the main issues under the relationship. Now, we go to quantity in the next video, and I will be talking about the quantity issues of right quantity, how to determine quantity, and so forth. So let's just end this video at that. Thank you.